Even those who are not Christians are familiar with the term, the Ten Commandments. According to the Bible, these are a set of rules that the God of Israel supposedly gave to Moses on Mount Sinai, written on stone tablets and presented as the divine foundation of morality. The Ten Commandments are often celebrated as the ultimate moral law, unchanging, timeless, and perfect. But if we strip away the reverence and examine them honestly, the Ten Commandments reveal themselves as an absurd political and religious agenda of an ancient tribal society, which, contrary to Christian claims, is even an immoral set of laws. Let's begin with the big picture. If humanity's morality truly depended on the Ten Commandments, we would still be stuck in the Iron Age. Real morality does not come from divine threats. It comes from human empathy, reason, and justice. And when we look closer at each commandment, this becomes painfully obvious. The very first two commandments are not about kindness, justice, or human dignity at all. They are about God's ego. The first one says, "You shall have no other gods before me." The second one says, "You shall not make idols." These are not moral principles. They are loyalty demands. Why would an all-powerful God be so insecure about competition from other gods? So right from the start, the supposed greatest moral code is not about people at all. It's about divine jealousy. And it gets worse. Exodus chapter 20 verse 5 says, God will punish children to the third and fourth generation for their parents' sins. That is not justice, that is cruelty. A truly moral principle would never condemn people for crimes they did not commit. This alone should make us question whether these commandments deserve to be called moral. Then comes a commandment about speech. Do not take the Lord's name in vain. Think about it. Is taking God's name in vain worse than slavery, rape, or genocide, none of which the Ten Commandments prohibit? The Ten Commandments doesn't say, do not slave other people, do not rape women, or do not commit genocide. They are not prohibited in the Ten Commandments. But taking God's name in vain is prohibited. If this is the so-called highest moral law, then its priorities are shockingly misplaced. The next commandment instructs, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy, meaning that Saturday should be kept sacred and all work should cease. Even Christians admit that this rule may not apply today. But if it is not applicable today, how could it ever claim to be a timeless moral law, even in the past? The biblical timeline shows that this law caused real problems even in its own time. In the book of Numbers in the Old Testament of the Bible, chapter 15, verses 32 to 36, a man gathering sticks on the Sabbath day was executed. He was killed for not keeping Sabbath, punishing minor infractions with extreme severity. In the book of Exodus in the Old Testament of the Bible, chapter 16, the Israelites struggled to gather manna on the sixth day to prepare for the Sabbath. So this law was creating daily survival challenges. Priests and elders had to constantly monitor compliance, creating tension between authorities and ordinary people. The law was rigid. No work, no fire, no cooking, no gathering. So even basic survival or emergencies could technically break it. This shows that the Sabbath commandment was not a moral law, but a rigid, impractical, and oppressive regulation of daily life. Now, some will point to the more familiar commandments, do not murder, do not steal, do not lie. But these are not divine revelations. Every society in history figured them out long before and without the Bible. And notice what's missing. Condemnation of slavery, torture, and child abuse. These were not prohibited in the Ten Commandments, and they are all allowed in the Bible. Then there is the infamous commandment against coveting. Do not covet your neighbor's house, wife, servant, ox, or donkey. Here, the wife is listed right alongside cattle and slaves. Women were listed alongside ox and donkey. A truly divine law would treat women as equals, not possessions. Another major problem is that the Bible itself is inconsistent about how these commandments should be applied. The Old Testament treats them as eternal laws. Jesus reiterates that these laws still apply in Matthew chapter 5 verses 17 to 19. Then Paul creates confusion by implying that these laws are no longer applicable. Romans chapter 7, Galatians chapter 3. Then modern Christians cherry-pick which commandments to follow, and some even claim that the 10 commandments are completely obsolete today, using passages in the New Testament like Colossians chapter 2. Because the Bible is contradictory and confusing regarding the applicability of the 10 commandments, Christians are often unsure and confused about whether they still apply, and if so, which ones do and which ones don't. This confusion is compounded by their inconsistent treatment of the Sabbath law, often considered invalid, or redefining it as a spiritual law. And the way these laws were enforced reveals their true nature. They were not presented as principles of compassion, but as threats of punishment. Fear of death is not morality, it's coercion. And fear-based obedience has never built true justice. When you step back and look at the whole picture, the 10 commandments don't rise above their time. They reflect the anxieties of an ancient tribe, loyalty to their God, protection of male property rights, rules for social order enforced through fear. They fail as a universal guide to justice or morality. We can clearly see that they are man-made with no divine hand in them. And here lies the ultimate irony. Since the 10 commandments are clearly a human invention, they reveal another uncomfortable truth. God who supposedly gave them is also a human creation. Ancient humans invented this God to impose their own absurd and illogical laws.